Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this morning, Humanizing Insurance Claims with Artificial Intelligence. I am absolutely thrilled to say we have a record number of participants on today's call. So this is obviously a topic that is extremely close to the hearts of all of our listeners out there. We have a wonderful group of panelists who will be sharing their thoughts around the customer experience, looking at how we can leverage AI-driven solutions with taking a strategic lens around the customer and really kind of diving into how we can take people, process, and technology to help improve the customer experience. A critical part of that, of course, is really kind of thinking about when and where across the insurance value chain that humans are looking for a human or an automated touch. We'll also be looking at catastrophe handling and kind of examining how AI and automation can help drive a better customer experience in that space as well. And another key area that we'll be talking about is really understanding how unlocking the value of claims data and fully automated business flows can help drive that push towards straight-through processing, and thus making the claim handlers' workloads much more productive. And again, kind of keeping in mind that key topic of improving the customer experience. So lots to get through this morning. A quick intro and background about myself. My name is Christopher Frankland. I'll be moderating the panel today. I'm the founder of InsurTech 360, and also I work with a company called Resource Pro. I've worked in the InsurTech space since 2015, and really, through the lens of people, process, and technology, I'm passionate about how we can leverage all of those components to improve the customer and insurance experience. So enough about me. There's lots of great content to get through. I would love to kick on and introduce our first speaker today, Andrew Pelcin. Andy's the Vice President of Claims Data Analytics Implementation at Chubb, having joined the team there in 2016. The Advanced Analytics team is responsible for a wide range of analytic projects, most concentrating on leading the interaction between the internal business clients, the modeling resources, and IT to assure the quality of the predictive analytic tools in the claims environment. Prior to joining Chubb, Andy spent 10 years at Aramark in the Risk Management and Operational Excellence departments. Andy has BAs in Anthropology and Geology from SUNY Buffalo, a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, and a CPCU. So, Andy, over to you.
Christopher, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I love the introduction. Very long business title that really says my job is to implement for Chubb, mostly predictive modeling, but the AI tools that we're using, how do we bring those to, in my world in claims, it's really, my part is not about the customer experience as much as it is about the adjuster experience, but the stuff is similarly applicable. And I want to talk this morning, I'm going to talk a little bit about fraud and how we do it, but I want to make a couple of comments first just to kind of bring, my perspective of this topic, which I love, but really from the implementation perspective. And I think if we set the stage this morning to say, hey, these are all great things, but where the rubber meets the road is, can I get it in to my system and make it work? And I'm actually going to start with a little story. Last week I was invited to an InsurTech conference, and there was a panel of C-suite insurance carrier individuals, and they made this statement which really kind of surprised me. And they said, look, we don't think that there's new technology that's going to come and blow up the insurance industry. And I thought, being at an insurance tech conference, that was not what I was expecting to hear. And it took me a while to think about what they meant, or at least what I interpreted what they meant. And that is something that I think will be pervasive throughout the call today, which is this technology isn't new. It's new to insurance, right? And that is actually a huge advantage to us, right? We're a risk-adverse industry, and really, we're not going to jump necessarily on this super new tech. And if I'm blowing somebody's conversation for later on, I apologize. But certainly from a Chubb perspective, it's not the newest, greatest technology. It's something that's been out there that's proven that we can implement. And the value there is you're not out trying to test out the technology, right? There are startups, there are vendors who can help you with that. It's, again, coming back to how do I implement that, right? We know the opportunity is large. There's a record number, more than 1,100 people signed up for this webinar, right? How do we get the interest and the, hey, everybody's recognizing it. If you're like me, you're getting the same heat from the senior leadership going, how do we get it? Can we do this? Everyone else is doing it. How are they doing it, and how are they doing it? And really, how are they accomplishing that piece of it, which is, can I implement it? Okay. And I'm hoping that that's, when we get to the questions at the end, that's part of what you can ask me and say, hey, what are your experiences? But I'm actually going to give you an example right now from the real world of Chubb, and that is how can we use AI in a fraud detection approach that actually changes the experience that our adjusters are having, as well as our success in identifying fraud. And I'll tell you that there's all kinds of technology now, right? You can implement if you record your phone calls or in real time, you can judge the stress level of the individual reporting the claim and perhaps start to get at whether or not they are lying in that initial report. You can look at what they're saying and how they're saying it and throw that through a natural language processor and start having the ability to judge the sentiment. You can, we're working deeply right now in a link analysis trying to figure out relationships that the human mind cannot necessarily get into an understanding. Something like, hey, it's really easy if you're trying to identify fraud, and I say, hey, there's an attorney where we know there's a fraudulent claim, and that attorney has 3 other claims with us. Well, we're going to go and look at that and say, hey, just because they have one known fraud claim, there's a likelihood that these others need to be examined in a greater detail, right? And you can provide that information to an adjuster. But the link analysis that we're doing through machine learning is trying to say, in that broader sense, when I look at all of the attorneys and all of the medical providers and all of the claimants and all of the insured and how those interactions come to play, right? That's a machine learning. Can I find these relationships? Hey, I've got them. That's wonderful, right? Statistically really interesting. How do I give it to a human being so that they can interpret what we just found and decide how to investigate that claim? Because if they're using what we find in machine learning and they are investigating claims that are more likely fraud and they find more fraud claims than we were before, that feeds back into the link analysis and we get even better, right? And as we get this constant feedback and improvement of the AI process, we're getting better and better fraud identification. Those are all easy things to understand. How do I put that into the hands of an individual who's been doing SIU fraud investigations for 25 years, is an ex-New York City cop, and right, they're not thinking, hey, I want this technology. They're thinking, all right, if you have something, how can you give it to me? And so that's really what Chubb is focused on right now, is this last piece of it. Can I put in the hands of that person who doesn't really understand how or why even the link analysis is working, and get them to say, oh, all right, this last piece of the implementation is the key, right? Because without that, without someone actually identifying the fraud, doing the investigation, proving it out, that's not the AI piece. The AI piece from our perspective is, how do I get the right claims into the hands of those investigators? And so that's what I would like to add to this conversation as far as, can you think about, all right, there's really cool technology. It's been proven out. That is not where insurance is going to benefit from this, but it's all about how do you get that last step, the step between the AI and that person. Christopher, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm trying to be conscious of the time.
Yeah, no, Andy, thank you so much. I think that's a really fascinating perspective, because I agree that, you know, a lot of this technology is becoming more accessible to incumbents and insurtechs. So I think the narrative is really shifting towards how can you use it to kind of drive a different and better customer experience. And I thank you for that. Moving swiftly on, we have Natalie Kaschalk here, the head of auto claims strategy at Farmers Insurance. Natalie heads up the auto claims space and has been with Farmers for over 7 years, having over 30 years in the claims industry and having served in many operational and strategic roles. She pulls from those years of background in her role today. One of her primary goals involves leading the auto claims technological transformation for Farmers. Natalie, thank you for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Oh, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. So I'm going to actually pivot off of what Andy spoke about. And so at Farmers, I would say about 5 years ago, we began with an investment in data scientists. And I would actually say we invested in one person. And that one person was the beginning of what I would say really starting to understand AI and how it fits into the claims world. Today we have a very large team of data scientists. And so our path really began in the area of fraud. So not necessarily the customer experience. We have a large volume of PIP states where there is significant medical fraud in states like Michigan, New York, New Jersey, Florida. Any of you who have any affiliation with those states understand kind of the challenges in those arenas. So the development around the use of a tool to really identify that the linkage also that Andy talked about, but also figuring out how to provide that to the adjuster real time as information came in was another important component. From a manager standpoint, we developed using Tableau reporting the ability to really understand what the landscape looked like on a particular claim level, or if you're looking at the linkage, what does that look like even across state lines. That opened our eyes up to a lot of areas that we just didn't know about. And there are ways to layer on additional information outside of what is coming at you, really understanding kind of the financial backgrounds, the partnerships that have been occurring in the medical arena, and so on and so on. So the layers can go really, really deep. But that was really the start of our kind of dipping our toes into the AI world. So fast forward to today, we're doing quite a bit more in the medical area. Many of us are challenged in the casualty area with climbing costs associated with these very high exposure claims. I'll say traumatic brain injury is on the horizon for many of us. So for us, it was almost imperative that we really understood how to identify these claims much earlier on, get the proper eyes on it, be it SIU, be it simply an adjuster that had the experience and the qualifications to really understand what was happening or what could happen in these claims. So we've done a lot of work around using text analytics and really understanding kind of the components that actually lead from one claim to start as something small and actually become something much larger. So those are the things that we are kind of incorporating on the casualty side. So more recently, in the areas of estimating, we've done some work starting with kind of using AI in a qualitative standpoint. We really wanted to understand photo AI in particular, and it was so new that we wanted to kind of cautiously get in, but really understand, is it real? Is it something that is tangible? Is it something that could impact our operations? Could it impact the customer experience? So we went into that area and found that yes, number one, it is real. There are some significant enhancements to your qualitative review of estimating that we put into play, and we were able to get some very clear eyes that we didn't have before on our guaranteed repair program. We do quite a bit of our volume through our guaranteed repair program, and we don't necessarily have eyes, and eyes meaning internal eyes on every single estimate or every single repair that is going through that channel. By using this tool, we have eyes on everything now. So that is leading to not only from a financial perspective, understanding kind of that leakage area, but from a customer perspective, if we get the estimations right and we repair, and it's something as simple as repair versus replace, it shortens that cycle time for the customer. There's less rental, and the customer then can go on to their normal lives much sooner. So I would say that the area that we're really trying to understand now as we kind of move into this is how do we incorporate this technology in the front end estimating. We are on our path. We're using some kind of actually pre-filling estimations right now, which is really the front to actually creating an estimate from just use of photographs. So it's definitely emerging technology. I also agree with Andy. I see this as very supplemental to what we are doing. I see it as more transformational. It is actually disruption oriented because it does have an impact on kind of the human capital in terms of you're becoming extremely much more efficient, and so you can do things faster and potentially need less people. But at the same time, we've used a lot of those less people in a different capacity. Some of the less people are some of our most qualified individuals and experienced individuals, so we're putting them on the qualitative piece of this. So I think that there's a shift that is occurring. We're all kind of figuring out how the balance works, which is really important. But at our organization, we have a very strong commitment to invest in this area and really understand it and keep testing it, piloting it. Even when we fail, it's okay. We've learned a tremendous amount and we can apply it to some other area. So that's basically what I wanted to share, and I think I can hand it over to the next individual.
Thank you, Natalie. That was really interesting, and I think it's fascinating to hear how cognitive APIs, but both yourself and Andy, your teams are looking at cognitive capabilities around sentiment analysis, text analytics. As part of your solution. So I think that's really cool. Before we go to David, just a quick reminder about today's webinar. So today's webinar is really being presented in preparation in the run-up to the Connected Claims conference that Insurance Nexus is putting on in Chicago on June the 5th and 6th, I believe. So there will be other webinars leading up to that big day, but as an event, it's one of the flagship events throughout the year, and there will be over 700 senior claims execs, insurance innovators, and technology experts in attendance. So keep it on your radar, everybody who's listening. So our next speaker, David Williams, is the VP of Claims with Texas Windstorm Insurance Association. David oversees all of the operations related to claims processing for the organization. Throughout his 35-year insurance claims career, David has developed expertise in improving customer service initiatives, overseeing loss cost control, and using process management technology and data analytics to solve business problems. David has advanced property and casualty insurance leadership experience in personal and commercial automobile and property insurance, catastrophe planning and response, litigation, special investigations, recovery, claims talent development, and business continuity planning. He has held a variety of positions, including field, multi-line claims adjuster and branch, regional and home office tactical and strategic claims leadership roles for national insurance entities, including some with a significant insurance business in Texas. So David, over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to be able to maybe provide a little different perspective. Texas Windstorm Insurance Association, otherwise known as TWIA, for those who don't know anything about us, is a quasi-governmental but private insurance company. We're a not-for-profit. We have only 230 employees. We're known as an insurer of last resort. We cover only the Texas coast, which is roughly around 200,000 customers. We provide wind and hail insurance only. As you can imagine, Hurricane Harvey in 2017 was a big deal, where in the hardest hit areas in the coastal bend, Rockport and Port Aransas, we insured more than 70% of the people there, which generated around 76,000 claims, all within 40 days, and caused us to pay out $1.2 billion, and we're still paying claims. We're a little bit unique because our challenge isn't growth, but really focusing on high service levels and efficiency, making sure we do things with the lowest possible cost. So we have a little different motivation than a lot of players out there. One of our biggest challenges, how do you scale when your normal claim volume is 500 to 1,000 claims a month, and then all of a sudden you can get 100,000 claims or more in 30 days from a major hurricane? So everything we do is focused not necessarily on what we see every day, but what could that worst case scenario be? For us, that worst case scenario is almost 200,000 claims, if you can believe that. So one of the things that we've used artificial intelligence and machine learning and data for, that is starting to get a lot of interest in the industry, we were the first to actually have to do this and complete it, was driven by Hurricane Ike back in 2008, where we saw roughly 2,500 what we call slab claims, where the storm comes in and wipes a property off the face of the earth, and all that's left is a concrete slab or a couple pilings. We had 2,500 of those and ended up having to settle them for close to $200 million, and took forever to get that done. And there was a lot of consternation with the policyholders because, like people are seeing all over the world, and certainly in Mexico Beach, Florida, after Hurricane Michael, which came first, the covered peril of wind or the covered peril of flood? Which carrier pays how much, what percentage? So solving that problem was something we were charged with back in 2011. And in 2018, we were able to implement what we call, it's known as the TWIA expert panel, but what we call it is data-driven damage determinations, where we combine pre-storm property characteristics data, wind and wave data collected during the storm, post-storm observational data gathered from surviving properties, including LiDAR, and then we use that data to calculate the timing of the destruction. So when did the actual timing of the slabbing occurred, and what was happening with wind and wave action before the storm, before the slabbing and after the slabbing. And through artificial intelligence and a lot of complicated science, we actually get outputs from our model runs that tell us the percentage of damage to key components to a structure and what the percentage of damage caused by wind was. It's a very sophisticated program, but what it does is it allows us within 48 hours of the storm to resolve slab claims instead of taking almost a year. So it's a pretty impressive technology that we were able to implement. If anybody has any interest, you can go to the Texas Department of Insurance website and search on the TWIA expert panel, and you can see what it's all about. Or certainly reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to share some information. Because we're a quasi-governmental entity, everything we do is in the public domain anyway. The other thing we're working on is how do we resolve the dilemma I think most people are finding after a major storm, which is spending a lot of money on sending independent adjusters out. So for us after Harvey, we spent millions upon millions of extra dollars in order to keep independent adjusters. And we were using these resources on small dollar claims. So the multi-channel claim adjusting experience is something we're definitely looking at. And we're trying to figure out how do we provide that multi-channel, from self-service to video collaboration, desk adjusting to drone adjusting, or even full adjusting. And the challenge we have, which is faced by many, is we don't get a lot of data from the policyholders and agents when they report their claims. So how else can we figure out how to triage those claims to automate that process of selecting the right channel to control our costs? We think the savings are potentially in the tens of millions of dollars where medium or large storms occur. So it's definitely worth something to look at. And some of the things we're looking at that we have already is loss type, the claim history, the location history, weather history, not only prior but current, insurance to value, property characteristics such as the construction type, number of stories, roof type, roof age, structure, and other underwriting data that we can run through an AI model that helps us understand, is this a complex loss, a small loss, or something in between, without having to wait to reach the policyholder to get more details. The other thing we're working on real quick is robotic process automation to remove mundane repetitive tasks like paying loss cost invoices, any data entry and indexing documents into our claim files so that we can free our people up to actually communicate with policyholders and move their claims along. And the only other thing I can add is the bottom line is everything is driven by data. And what we found is you've got to have good data governance, you've got to have rules and structure, you've got to have ability to mine the data, and that privacy is becoming more and more of an issue, and figuring out how to build trust through everything you do so you can get the data you need in the real time is really important. So with that, I'll turn it back over, and thank you for the opportunity.
Cheers, David. Thank you so much. I think, again, that kind of touches upon a lot of really interesting use cases for AI and as you mentioned, RPA in that instance. And I think it's amazing to kind of get some tangible examples around how the claims customer experience can be enhanced, and that's an incredible achievement to cut down the claims handling time to that extent. So very cool. So our final speaker today, Amrish Singh, is the head of product enterprise at Metromile. Amrish, Metromile is the leading pay-per-mile car insurance company in the U.S. Metromile Enterprise, the enterprise software group at Metromile, enables insurance carriers to digitally transform their business using Metromile innovative AI and automation SaaS platforms. Metromile believe that by combining modern approaches in data science and machine learning with an exceptional user experience, cloud technologies at scale, and deep expertise in the insurance domain, we can help insurers deliver the best customer experience at the industry's lowest cost. Amrish has worked in the enterprise software industry for over a decade and is an expert in using software and data science to transform and optimize business processes. Amrish, thank you so much for being on today, and over to you.
Thanks, Chris, and hello everyone. I'm really happy to be on the call today. I guess I can provide sort of a unique perspective on how we're using AI and data science, because Metromile as a company really was launched in 2011. And when we launched the company, our perspective on car insurance was essentially trying to figure out how can we take data science, which was the training that the founders had, and combine that with traditional approaches to car insurance and other disciplines like software engineering to provide a car insurance product that's very different from what's there in the market, or what was there in the market at that point in time. So we launched in 2011, and we've grown rapidly year over year. Today we have the largest number of pay-per-mile car insurance policies in the U.S. And our focus a lot has been on building technology really throughout the entire claims handling process. We've built products at each step of the customer interaction. We focused a lot more on edge-based technology, so technology that's very much directly associated with either collecting information from the customer or or delivering value back to the customer, and then relied on connecting that edge technology with traditional claims handling software. And so what I want to do is probably address some of the specific prompts that we had for today's webinar around data, fraud, and automation. And since I'm a technologist by trade, the way I sort of want to talk about this is focus specifically on the kinds of technologies that we've built. When we think about claims handling, the goal really here is to offer the best experience to the customer, because they're at a very vulnerable point in time in their life where, they're filing a claim because something really bad happened with them. But at the same time, as an insurance company, try to make sure that we're doing the right job in identifying fraud and making sure that our loss leakage is as low as possible, and also to reduce the cycle time of processing the claim, such that we're getting the claims finished as quickly as possible. So we've got really 4 major pieces of technology that power our claims handling process. At the very start, we built something called dynamic FNOL. Traditional force notice of loss recording software is essentially you go to a website and you fill out a big form, and typically that turns customers off because customers would be naturally inclined to just call a human being and have a conversation with them. But we obviously realize that if we can capture as much structured data as possible from the very start of the claims handling process, we won't have to worry as much about converting free-form text data that's captured in a phone call and doing any sort of processing on top of that to get to structured data. So we built something called a dynamic FNOL, which is essentially more of a rules-based engine that captures information from customers and asks subsequent information from the claimant based on the responses they're giving at the time of filing a claim. And so based on the kinds of loss they identify and the subsequent information they give, we've built the rules in there to try to identify the next set of questions we should ask them so as to get as much structured data as possible at the very start of the claims process. Once we've captured information, we've built quite a number of very sophisticated fraud models that go beyond traditional link analysis to really try to codify the thinking that an SIU would have when trying to evaluate a claim into a series of machine learning models. And so really what that does is we've got this process, and this is really a product that we have today, which lets SIUs give feedback on specific claims. We capture that information and train a machine learning model such that over time we get better at automatically identifying claims that are fraud versus not fraud. And if we can get SIUs working together with the model that we have, we build this interesting recurring loop where the more our model reacts to claims and gets feedback from SIU, the better it becomes over time. The other thing sort of that's unique for Metromile is that we are 100% telematics. Pay-per-mile insurance essentially requires us to be able to capture the information about the mileage of the customer. The way we do that is using a specific telematics device. But that also gives us some unique opportunities in how we can use the data with the appropriate consent of our insureds in handling the claims process and giving them, again, a richer experience with the process. And so we've built something called virtual witness that allows us to recreate the scene of an accident using the data that the insured has consented to providing us for a specific claim. But what's really important here, both for us using telematics data as well as us evaluating fraud, is that we're always being respectful of the insured when trying to figure out what's really going on with the claim and getting consent from them for using the data that they've provided us. A real big innovation over the last 2 years has been this thing we call AVA, which is for us a virtual claims handler. So AVA is a software automation platform that allows us to automate the entire back-end claims handling process, starting from coverage verification to connecting with estimatic systems, to connecting with repair shops, rental companies, and issuing payments. Our goal really is to get to a point where we are processing all of the more simpler claims using straight-through processing or using AVA. And most recently, we got to a point where we have an average of about a 12.5-hour cycle time for our simplest of claims. Our perspective and our philosophy around building our technology is to provide, we call this as giving our claims handlers superpowers, essentially to provide them the right kinds of information at the right points in time to make the right decisions and to eventually create the best customer experience for our customers. And so much of the technology, and I think somebody else mentioned this on the panel earlier as well, much of our technology is designed around helping the claims handlers be better at what they do, and in certain cases, taking away some of the more mundane and uninteresting tasks away for them, or for analyzing large amounts of data in a very short period of time using machine learning, such that they're focused more on higher order thinking or more value generating activities. When we build Metromile, we initially built a lot of this technology internally, but now the group I work in essentially is working on licensing a lot of this technology to other insured as well. One of the specific things that I think we wanted to touch on was on fraud and how AI and algorithms can work in collecting or identifying inconsistencies in data. And we've spent a lot of our time and our effort specifically on fraud detection and analysis, not just for identifying what's fraud or not, but more importantly, once we've identified if something is not fraud, in kicking off straight-through processing. And this is where fraud detection and straight-through processing can go along so well, because the downstream actions associated with fraud detection really is the ability to automate something if something is a clean claim and doesn't have any issues associated with it. The other benefit that fraud really does, which is where we invest a lot of our efforts with fraud analysis, is identifying these specific issues related to a specific claim. One of the challenges with machine learning is the more sophisticated you build your ML model, the harder time you will have in deciphering the reasons why an ML model is saying if something is fraud or not. This is why traditionally insurers have often used a rules-based engine to try to identify fraud, right? It's a big decision tree which goes through a series of rules, and at the very end it spits out, this may be a fraud because this rule is told us that this could be fraud. But that isn't as effective as using machine learning, of course, as many of the other panelists talked about as well. But the challenge that we face with ML models is as we've made them more and more sophisticated, and really half of our company is more on the ML side and the other half is traditional insurance, we've spent a lot of our efforts in trying to understand, as we get more sophisticated with fraud analysis, how can we also be very good at deciphering the reasons why an ML model is saying something is fraud or not. If you go back to thinking about how your brain works, when you make a decision about something, if it's a higher order decision, it's really hard to figure out what is the specific reason why you made a decision in one way or the other. And that's been something that we've thought a lot about. One last point I want to raise is that the other sort of major challenge has been for us is, as a company, our value is to ensure that we're doing right by the customer at every step of the claims handling process. And that's where data really comes in, right? What we've struggled with is not collecting data, because we did that using our dynamic FML product, or processing data, which we can do using cloud technologies, but in ensuring that we're using data at the right time with the proper consent from our customers. And so we worry a lot and we focus a lot in making sure that we are using data the right way and with the proper consent from our users and our customers, such that we don't end up in a situation where just because we have access to data, that we have the franchise of using that data the right way. That's what I had in terms of opening remarks. I'll hand it back over to you, Chris.
Hey, Amrish, thank you so much for that insight. That was great. So I did want to open the floor to some questions. We have about 20 minutes left on the clock. I've got a couple of questions here that have come in. I believe you can use the webinar tool to direct any questions in my direction. The first one, Theodora Alexieva. And again, I think these are pretty much open. This one's open to the floor. Which of the approaches is better, using AI for videos or audio analysis? I think both could be an option, but if anybody would like to comment on perhaps how you are using AI for video or audio analysis.
So this is Natalie. So we don't have a lot of experience in the audio area, so I can only comment on the video or the photo. But I see them as different opportunity areas. The way I look at all of this technology is it's an ability to get like additional insight or help directionally make the process easier for the customers. So they're a little bit different in terms of what it is that you're trying to achieve. From a photo perspective, the use of technology can help to really speed up the process because it's all rules-based. These are things that, you know, adjusters have been trained in, and it's just set up to really market on the speed. The other side is an area we're going to be getting into, but we don't have experience in. So, you know, I can't speak from an experiential perspective, but it's different. So it's really understanding kind of the intonation of the person and, again, how to react differently, more quickly, assess. I think Andy mentioned from a fraud perspective. I mean, those are some kind of value tools that I would say you would have at your hand.
So this is Andy. I can actually speak to the audio side, but not to the video side. So this should complement Natalie. I think that it is the intonation, the sentiment analysis via the voice is a difficult task. We actually ended up transcribing the voice to text and then using Watson to analyze the sentiment within the text. I think I'd like to add, because it kind of builds on what Amrish was saying as far as what that got us was some interesting information. But there was all this ancillary thing. We now have the text to all the phone calls. And all of a sudden, QAing how the reps are interacting with the customers, getting the sentiment of both the rep and the customer, right? All of a sudden, you have this ability to have a quality assurance check on how well your rep is dealing with a stressful situation from the call. It opened up the, hey, you know what? We're here looking from a fraud perspective. Here's a whole nother avenue within the company that we can help. We can now QA every single file, right? Not case selective, but you can do whatever you can identify, you can QA, and that's where I think we went in to do fraud detection and we came out with a QA, like that's what's going to happen from my perspective in insurance, right? Is hey, there's this technology out there. Hey, we're trying to solve an individual problem. But as you kind of open your eyes and say, well, here's a new set of data. Here's data in a different way. What else could I do with that? And I think Amrish's point about how they use the data and when is fantastic, and his concerns over are they allowed to use that is something that is going to become pervasive.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. That's great, and you know that actually does lead into kind of a follow-up question here from David Williams. And Amrish, I know you touched upon this a little bit, but What are some of the largest risks associated with implementing AI-related technologies, and how do you manage them? And I think to expand on that, even from an audit perspective, how do you kind of gain visibility into what is essentially a black box decision-making process?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is also the biggest risk, which is understanding, am I working with accurate data? Because garbage in, garbage out. And what we found when mapping properties, that not always the addresses were valid, even with the U.S. Postal Service or other governmental entities. So that was a big challenge. Making sure that you have accurate age of structures, age of components. It's amazing how often someone misses the type of construction where it's actually a custom-built feature, even though it doesn't look like that, or vice versa. So working with accurate data is critical, and the biggest risk is that you're making decisions, or the machine is making decisions for you with bad data. Hopefully that answers the question.
No, it does, David. I think you're spot on. I don't know whether anybody else has a comment on kind of how you might mitigate risk around using some of this technology.
Yeah, I guess I can add some more color around this. So I think David's absolutely right. I think the biggest challenge is to have the right kind of data that goes in, and I think this is where I speak with a lot of insurers as part of my job. And one of the things I often realize is how lightly we take the very first customer interaction, which is the point where the customer is reporting loss, or the series of interactions in which a customer is reporting loss. And I think, what we've learned the very hard way is that the more structured we can create the first set of interactions. In the ethanol case, for example, we ask between 50 to 100 questions in our first notice of loss, but we ask it in a way, and we orient these questions in such a way where the customer is not spending more than 5 to 10 minutes answering a large number of questions. And so what companies really need to do a lot of thinking around is, how can we get as much structured information as quickly as possible and as early as possible, such that we're not doing the job of trying to convert the free form information that we have as part of call logs or other interactions or emails back into structured data, which can then get fed into data science models. The way machine learning often works is the signal to noise ratio is really high. So the way you can really clear that up is to have as much structured data as possible. The other interesting problem that we often face with is data scientists need to often be oriented by defining the problem as cleanly as possible. And so if you tell a data scientist, look at this claims data and build more models, that cannot be very productive. Or if you get a little bit more sophisticated and say, I want to know if a specific case is fraud or not, that's where data scientists can put some more thought. But if you can get a lot more prescriptive in initially how you define the problem, the data scientists will do a better job in creating the models that uniquely address those specific problems. And so this is where our perspective has often been to pair a data scientist with an SIU for fraud, or pair a data scientist on the risk side with an actuary for risk, such that we're being very specific in how we are defining the problem and unleashing our data scientists to build AI models to solve those problems.
Thank you, Amrish. A great question here for people who have yet to kind of embark on this digital transformation journey. So this is from Sandeep, and what are the first steps to get started on your AI journey? Andy, Natalie, how do you guys first kind of get started in this exciting space?
So sure, I'll take a crack at that first, Natalie, if you don't mind.
Sure.
my honest advice is find a problem that the senior leadership sees either as having a lot of money in from a leakage perspective or could generate some kind of revenue stream. And I'm not being flippant. I'm trying to say you got to start somewhere, and you need the buy-in from the leadership. If you're solving a fantastic problem that it's not on their radar yet, you're not going to get the support you need to do it. And so if you have done none of this yet, I would say it all comes down to identifying a solvable problem that has definable benefit and return to it, and it will all, in my experience, explode from there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as I mentioned before, our first dip into this area was really around the fraud area. And we started with one individual and built out a team, because as we started to get into the fraud arena, we saw, wow, there are just so many opportunities that we just did not have insight into. And the more you kind of layer on, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And, in the area, again, of casualty, like how do you identify these really nasty claims before it becomes a big surprise and you've got a huge reserve jump at the very end, or potentially looking at excess exposures and things like that? How do you really understand that? Those are not only big problems, but from an insurance company's perspective and at the executive level, these are really big ways to avoid paying out huge amounts of dollars, and that gets to the bottom line. So I agree completely with Andrew. It's just go ahead and just get into the world of if it's starting in the fraud area, because that's so ripe for AI, that's a great way to go. But there are lots of things out there, and to the area of kind of the risk adverse arena that we insurance companies operate in, you really have to have an agreement that it's okay to fail a little bit, to learn and to readjust, regroup, reassess, and go ahead and re-implement, because that's the only way you move forward.
Chris, can I add something to that? Can I add something to that, Chris?
Please do.
I want to build on something that Amrish said, which is my experience. And if you're just starting out to do this, and Natalie set me off again to think about it, you need a data scientist, or you need a group of data scientists, but don't expect you have a data scientist that actually understands insurance or the problem. And if you find that person, keep them forever and pay them a lot of money. The alternative is take that data scientist and pair them with someone. My entire team's existence at Chubb is to be the translators from the data scientist to the IT to the business. Think about that role, and that to what I said in the beginning, it's all about implementation. Part of that implementation is you're not going to find that perfect data scientist who understands how to model fraud casualty. But if you sit them next to somebody who understands fraud casualty and doesn't understand modeling and let them interact, that's where you'll get the benefit. And so don't try to find that perfect employee. Try to build the pieces you need to drive that value back to the senior leaders.
Chris,
awesome. Thank you.
Dave Williams here. If I could chime in real quick.
Sure.
Because we're a small organization, we have some scale that actually works in our favor. So I see every customer complaint, whether it's direct to the Department of Insurance or to somebody in our organization, review them and make sure they're responded to correctly. I see every customer survey to see whether there's positive or negative trends. So, and the management team that works with me also sees everything, so that we're acutely aware of what the customers are thinking and seeing and reacting to, which helps us understand where the problems lie. We also have, we spend a lot of time asking, why do we do it the way we do it? And what if we change the way we did it? What would the result be? We also ask ourselves constantly, what do I need? Why do I need it? And does the customer understand what we need and why we need it? And so there's a lot of questioning that goes on at every level here, and we've empowered our people who are closest to the customer to make recommendations and suggest things, because we're all in one place, and it's much easier than if you have branch offices and regional offices and things all over the place to see problems in real time and address them. So it gives us a little bit of an advantage, I think, certainly when it comes to serving our customers.
Thanks, David. That's great insight. I think we have time for one more question, and I apologize to everybody who is. We have some great questions, but I can't get to all of them, unfortunately. So this one is really for Andrew and Natalie. Wei Lun Wong has a question around how do you ensure that fraud AI models will not unfairly discriminate certain individuals or certain locations and states? And I suppose that pertains to kind of a bias question around the machine learning component.
Yeah. So the way I'll go ahead and take it from. Yeah, it's a great question, and obviously that is what your intention is to remain as unbiased. And actually, the use of this tool has actually pulled us away from a lot of the bias I think that we originally had by using kind of the old checklist mentality of, if you've got these 3 criteria, it's something to elevate. It's really looking at patterns and utilizing the extreme amount of data to say, I've got a pattern here that I just didn't see. And unless you really dissect every single text and every single bit of information that comes your way on a claim, you really can't understand that that this is really, it has been elevated simply because the amount of occurrences of a specific area that is indicative of fraud is really just sitting right there in front of you. So for me, it's actually eliminated a lot of that bias, or actually eliminated the bias, because it's really factually based. It's based on the information that is presented to us.
Thank you. Okay, so we do only have about 3 minutes left on the clock. So I would like to wrap up and say thank you to everybody who joined the call today. Again, we had a record number of people sign up for the event, which I think is indicative for the interest in this space, and that's fantastic. And thank you to our panel for your insight. I think that this is a space, and Andy, you mentioned earlier about a lot of this tech is not necessarily new, but I think what's happening is I think we're seeing kind of exponential growth around a lot of the capabilities in the cloud. The API economy is really opening up a ton of opportunity in terms of reimagining and rethinking the traditional customer experience, how people buy and manage their policies, and also from a kind of a fraud and claims perspective. Obviously, we've heard how from David how the claims handling routine has been just cut in terms of the amount of time it takes to handle a claim. A couple of other comments that I would probably just like to add is from from my perspective, I think it's interesting and important to keep in mind that everything we've heard here has come from the perspective of kind of a people process and technology angle, where I think it's very difficult for one of those pieces to kind of exist without the others. So when you think about your digital transformation journey and how you might leverage AI and machine learning to enhance and augment processes, I think finding that balance between the three is quite critical. So just one more quick reminder, June the 5th and 6th is the Connected Claims USA Summit in Chicago. And I'm sure if anybody out there has any additional questions, reach out to myself or the panelists on LinkedIn, connect with us, and we'll be happy to take those offline. So thank you, everybody. Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.